Aloha nerds, and welcome back to the TheSalawag's Why It's Great Gut Reaction, where I watch things and react from the gut. Blade is big in the news right now, and because of all the drama with the writing of that script. And so I thought, why not talk about one of my favorite superhero movies, Blade? I did happen to just watch it very recently, but I didn't make a video about it yet. Blade, man. It's a classic. It's a real classic, not beyond cult classic. I think it's a classic film in every sense of the word. But Blade comes out at a time when superhero movies aren't doing so well. Very few have hit the zeitgeist or really gotten people the way that you would want a blockbuster movie to hit people. And Blade really opened that door. And I think one of the great things about the movie is because, like the superhero itself, the superhero genre itself is such a unknown entity and scary for people to go into. And so when you have this superhero that's also part vampire and all of that stuff, that's a world of mystery for mortal people as well. But just getting into it, when all the filmmakers in the interviews talk about making Blade 1, they talk about how it was a shot in the dark. David Goyer did have a screenplay that was very strong that Hollywood was very interested in when it came to making the film, but it took a long time to find a director to make that movie. And a lot goes into the making of a movie like this, and I just want to talk about some of the stuff that I learned about. I've been studying film since I was like 13 years old, learning about why filmmakers make certain decisions and what makes movies what they are. And actually, Blade 2 was my inspiration. Blade 2 was directed by Guillermo del Toro. Everyone knows him now as the master behind Pan's Labyrinth and Crimson Peak and all that, and gave us the awesome Pacific Rim. But Blade 2, again, coming out at a time when superheroes are really just getting their footing with the first X-Men movie, the first Spider-Man film, and Blade 2, I thought, why is this movie so beautiful? That was the first thing I thought about that movie as a kid. I was like, most action movies, even if you look at Face Off, yeah, there might be good cinematography, but it all kind of looks the same. It all kind of looks daytime. There's random slow motion shots that showcase the stunt, but it looks very stunty. And here I am watching Blade 2, and I'm asking myself, why is it that this movie's affecting me on more levels than just how cool the action is? It's so beautiful to look at, and the characters are so engaging despite being dark and menacing and all of that. And one of the first things I did to find out is I watched what's a commentary. I'm at 13 years old. What is a commentary? I put on the commentary for Blade 2, and Del Toro talks about, in the making of Blade 2, he watched every single roll of film shot for Blade 1 because he wanted to really understand what the film language was of the Blade movie. He wanted to capture that feeling and that expression and really understand what made the Blade movie work. And when it came to directing Wesley Snipes, he said, this is not my movie. This is Blade. It can't be Guillermo del Toro's movie. In my movie that I would generate myself, Blade would be the bad guy. But in this movie, you have to be the hero. So he gave Wesley Snipes the freedom to play Blade how he wanted to play Blade, which is the best thing you can really do, especially with a character like this who has got so much baggage and stuff going on. But so much of that came from recognizing the first movie. Now, the first movie, the first Blade, it's very grungy, it's very grimy, it's very urban, it's very intense and visceral. And everyone knows that first opening sequence, which was in the script. This is something David Goyer came up with. The blood shower at the blood rave, and that was one of the most iconic sequences of all the Blade movies, and it's one of the most iconic things from Blade. And to that end, I say if you're making a Blade movie today, A, it has to be R rated, and B, Blade has obviously got to be the main character. If you're not thinking those things, you're not the right filmmaker to be approaching a Blade movie. It's just the truth. If you're not understanding that your main character is the main character, and you're trying to do like Kenobi and sidestep a female or a female of a different race or religion to be the real main character while the main character is just relegated to the side, then guess what? You're a bad filmmaker, you're wrong for the project, and you need to get off right now. Look, this is an iconic character. This is an iconic piece of film. But also there's much to be learned. There's much to be learned about why it's iconic and why it's so well made. And a lot of it is happy accidents. A lot of it is a lot of disagreements made on set, and a lot of people with egos and attitudes and ideas that conflict with each other. That is, sometimes when you make a movie, not everyone is on the exact same page. And even in the making of Blade, you'll see if you watch the commentary, you watch the interviews, you'll see there's a lot of times where the director had one idea for how to shoot a scene. Wesley Snipes, who was sort of one of the stunt choreographers as well, would have a completely different idea about how the scene should be played. And even when it came down to the editing, have different ideas about how it should be edited. And all those things, all those different opinions, what matters is, A, what's the right decision to make for the character and for the movie, and sticking to that decision once you realize it's the right decision. And so, and when it comes to the making of Blade, there's so many things that make it so strong. And one of the first things, an easy thing I want to get into about what makes it a strong picture, is storytelling through music. Now, if you've watched my podcast, I talk about storytelling through performance, how an actor isn't just there to cry on screen. That's not what makes a dramatic performance or a good performance. An actor is there to communicate emotionally the journey of the characters and what they're going through. And I always cite Spider-Man. When Tobey Maguire finds Uncle Ben, played by Cliff Robertson, dead on the street or dying on the street, they do have a beautiful moment of human exchange, which was requested by Cliff Robertson himself. Can I just talk to Peter one more time? And all he says is, Peter, Peter. And that actually hits Tobey Maguire much harder than just finding Uncle Ben dead. But what happens is you see Uncle Ben die, and you see the infamous Tobey Maguire cry that everyone made fun of for so long. But he doesn't just cry. He cries, and then he hears the shooter. He's overhearing the police say the shooter is 6 blocks down the street, and we're in pursuit. And Tobey Maguire goes from crying to anger to a decision. And then he leaves the scene. And so in a single shot, Tobey Maguire is going through an enormous amount of emotion, but he's communicating to the audience, I'm not just sad. I'm hearing something that's changing the course of my life, and I'm going to make a decision on it. And that's storytelling through performance. Now, the music, although it may take place over the course of the entire arc of the movie, music is a part of storytelling as well. And this is one of my earliest lessons in learning how cinema works, was watching the special features of the Blade movies. And when I would eventually get to Blade 1, again, a lot of different people have a lot of different ideas and all that stuff. I believe it was the music supervisor, but he was talking about how the music in Blade shifts from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. And if you watch that blood rave sequence, yeah, we got a lot of great techno music. It's really exciting. But there's even the great techno music that happens when Blade shows up. And when Blade shows up, you see the way it's photographed. Blade is silent. He doesn't say anything. His mere presence intimidates the rest of the vampires. And, that's good directing. That's good casting. All the cast members, they look like they should be there. They all have that right sort of viciousness to the way they act and behave. It's very good casting. But when it comes to the music, Blade gets into this opening action sequence where he's slicing and dicing everyone left and right. And that great track is playing underneath the scene, and sonically, musically, we are being communicated something here, and that this is Blade in his comfort zone. This is Blade on a regular daily basis. This is what he does. And if you'll notice, for the rest of the movie until the end, every time Blade's in an action scene, we don't get techno music. We have its dramatic score. When Blade, enters the room that has the pages of the Book of Erebus, and he's looking at all of the pages and glass. Vampires surround him, and we do get a little action scene, but the music the beautiful music by Mark Isham, it's not played for action. It's played for drama and mystery, and the epicness of what's being hinted at. Blade knows that these pages written in blood from the vampire Bible, that these pages hold great significance to the vampires themselves, and has no problem destroying them because he hates vampires. But again, like, this is an action scene, but the music is not saying dun 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 dun, because we're part of the story now. We're building into everything that's going on. And as the story goes on, and Blade befriends the woman he saves from the hospital and brings her into the fold. She has vampire bites, all that stuff. And we meet Whistler, played excellently by Kristofferson. And you eventually see the vampires infiltrate Blade's little facility, and they beat up Whistler almost to death and leave him dying for Blade to find. When we get to Blade getting revenge for the death of Whistler, and he's trying to save Karen again. We have all these action scenes throughout the film, but the music is not techno-y. It's not playing that, because Blade is in the course of transformation as well. Throughout the course of the movie, we learn Blade's story, that he lost his mother at birth, and that he grew up homeless on the streets, feeding on homeless people. And it was Whistler who rescued him from a life of homelessness. And Whistler has his own story of losing his whole family to vampires, and thus, the origin of Blade's hate for vampires is born in this very untold gap of storyline, all of which should be the content of this remake of Blade. If you're going to reboot the character, now you have the room to tell that story. And I think what's beautiful is that these are two men who have suffered enormous loss. And yes, the older man is white, but it doesn't mean, him being white doesn't mean he didn't experience horror. That horror is what brought him into this world. And, Blade, being raised by the white man doesn't mean he didn't experience racism or whatever. All that woke shit, it's not excluded from the movie because racism is not real. It's just because that's not what this story is about. This story is about a vampire hunter and everything that led him to being in this life. He's not even in the real world as far as he's concerned. His world is hunting and slaughtering vampires. That's what he lives his life as. He's the Omega Man. I haven't seen that movie all the way through, but he's the Omega Man. He is I Am Legend. He's the Boogeyman. Blade is the first John Wick. Before we had John Wick, we had Blade. But when you're learning the origin of Blade, again, it's all this beautiful music by Mark Isham. And when Whistler finally gets attacked and beaten to death by the vampires, and Blade is seeking out his revenge, you'll note we get the first version of, in Batman Begins, when Batman first shows up and beats all the mob gangsters and you don't really see him. We get the first version of that in the first Blade. This is, David Goyer's writing and Stephen Norrington's directing. The first version of that is in Blade, when Blade enters the vampire citadel or lobby, whatever the heck it is, and you just hear his bike riding around, and he starts shooting up the vampires, and the music is incredibly dramatic. After Whistler dies, Blade has this beautiful sequence where he's meditating, and he cuts the roots of a plant that he keeps. You see that Blade is a well-kept man, although he keeps to himself and he's a violent person. He's a well-kept man, like a samurai. He keeps his place very neat. He keeps his weapons very clean, and Whistler's the same way. He might be grungy and a little bit grimy, and he might be the guy you see at a biker bar having a drink, but he is in his own home, keeps his stuff nice and takes care of himself. He doesn't just work out to take care of himself. Every aspect of himself he takes care of, and it's indicated by the fact that he takes care of this beautiful pot plant. But after the death of Whistler, you see him cutting the roots. Now that we got the symbolism of removing the roots, because the movie begins with Blade as a baby being born, and the first thing he sees as a baby is his mother dying. And so now, in our third act, in our sequence, our building action that leads to the third act, Whistler dies. So, we're seeing the whole life of Blade come to a screeching halt at the loss of both parents. He had a mother he lost at birth, and he loses his father figure, essentially, in the third act of this movie. And so symbolically, he's cutting the roots. He's losing his sense of cleanliness, his sense of calm, his sense of clean. And he's just going all out. And he goes all out, and he fights with emotion. And Mark Isham's music is so powerful and potent with emotion as he's shooting down all these guards who are protecting, Deacon Frost, our bad guy.
Please, I just work for them.
The music is telling the story of this character. We're not hearing techno music because it's an action sequence. It's a mistake to think that because you're watching an action movie and fun music is playing, that it's just playing for your benefit as the audience member. You might have that benefit as an audience member, but at least in Blade in particular, the music is telling the emotional story of Blade, because Blade as a character and as the film is cut from the same cloth as Batman, Michael Keaton's Batman from 1989 and Batman Returns, where Tim Burton had the philosophy that this guy is going to dress up as a bat and he's going to intimidate people. He's not going to be a very talkative guy. He's not going to be walking around having speeches about himself. And Blade is cut from that same cloth, where he doesn't walk around having a bunch of speeches about himself. He talks very little. When he speaks, it's because he has something to say. That's the kind of person Blade is. And it's indicated by the use of the music. The storytelling is there, the script is there, everything is there. The performance, Wesley Snipes' performance is fantastic. And again, you think action movie, right? So I don't have to appreciate anything in this movie. But Wesley Snipes is a theatrically trained actor, so he's using everything he knows. And if theatrically trained actors know to control the tone of their voice, and that they can make certain words very distinct, because that's what makes the script clearer to the audience and really shows you which of those words has emotional meaning to the person saying them. It's not like normal conversation where a person might just say everything in kind of the same tone. Maybe they break at a certain point, but in a movie, you have to make these choices intentionally so that it all translates to the audience as they're watching it. In real life, you may not necessarily have those choices when someone is speaking to you. It's not a natural way to talk, but it feels natural in a movie because you're watching a presentation of someone's emotional experience. And so while Tobey Maguire has that one scene I can cling to for storytelling to performance, Wesley Snipes is doing that for this entire film, where, as Karen, played by, I forget the actress's name at the moment, he rescues Karen, the doctor, from a hospital at the beginning of the movie. And as she is the one who's learning the story of Blade. And she is the one who asks him, what happened? I was told the story about your mom, and what happened was horrible. And he just doesn't want to hear about it. He's so lost in his anger and his self-hatred, and the reason he takes the reason he has a serum to fight his thirst is because he doesn't want to be a blood-sucking vampire. He hates that part of himself. that self-hatred is a core aspect of his character. And self-hatred and discomfort with oneself, this is why I kind of hate the term cis, comfortable in skin, because just because you're a person born a male who identifies as a male doesn't really mean you're comfortable in your own skin. If that was true, you wouldn't have mansplaining. You wouldn't have toxic masculinity. You wouldn't have any of these things, because people only act this way because they think they're supposed to. Someone acted that way and demonstrated that as what manliness is supposed to be. And out of insecurity, they're puffing up their chest and mansplaining and acting that way because that's how they think they're supposed to act. But a lot of these people aren't really comfortable with themselves and aren't really happy with themselves. That's why they're doing it so much and so hard, because they actually don't know what the proper form of manhood is supposed to be. And this is something, I want to be clear. It's like we're coming up with all these words and definitions in this modern era that are supposed to be true, but they're not really true. Like I said about Miss Marvel, when I did my Miss Marvel review, one of the things I felt missing from that character was her discomfort with herself. Even though I'd only read one comic book issue, the comic book issue I'd read of Miss Marvel was she had tried to change herself into, in the comics, her power is to change her body shape and appearance. And she does seem to have a kind of mystical energy to her, which should have led to the energy blasts and all that. I feel like that's totally there. But either way, she tried to change herself from a petite, skinny, almost too skinny Muslim girl. And Muslim is a religion, not a race, but she's Pakistani, right? So she tried to turn herself from a Pakistani girl into a blonde white girl with curves. And it didn't work. Her body just completely deformed. And it could partially be because she doesn't have full command of her powers. But throughout this one issue, she's dealing with all the consequences, the physical pain of trying to pull herself back into her normal form. And, that's a beautiful story where someone, yes, born a girl, identifies as a girl, is not comfortable in her own skin. She sees this other identity in the media and amongst her friends as, oh, this is what I'm supposed to look like, and this is what beauty is supposed to look like. And it's just an idea of what beauty is supposed to look like. She's too young to know that yet. But now she's dealing with the consequences of trying to change herself and realizes that she needs to learn to be comfortable with who she is as a person. I thought that was such a powerful message, both for girls who grow up, especially now in the social media age. That's such a powerful message to learn that, yeah, girl power and all that. But just because the media shouts girl power doesn't mean that you yourself are comfortable with yourself, with how you look and how you feel. And Blade is very much that. He's not comfortable with himself. But in his case, he's not discomfortable with being black. He's discomfortable with being a fucking vampire. He's discomfortable with this natural desire within himself to hurt other people and to take their blood. He has this natural monster within him that he doesn't want to use on people because he is half human, and he knows, and from Whistler, from the white man, from a human man, he learned compassion and kindness and got a sense of family that he didn't get because he lost his mother. And so that's the part of him that he values, and that through the course of Blade 1, I did say in a previous clip that he doesn't have an arc, and I didn't really mean that he didn't have an arc. I just meant that his arc didn't change what he wanted to do with his life. Blade's arc in this movie is that he's becoming comfortable with himself. That by movie's end, there is a cure for being a vampire. But it takes the whole course of the movie of Blade fighting these vampires and losing Whistler and having this new friend with this completely new concept of self-acceptance. And she's a doctor, right? So she's trying to, her job, do no harm. Her life mission is to help people be the best of themselves and be the right version of themselves. And she does that with Blade. Blade is her patient. Blade is her friend. And by the end of the movie, the vampires kidnap Blade and they use him for their torture device that's meant to bring out the blood god, and it's an amazing action sequence at the end. I think really stunning visuals. But we have this incredible visual effects and special effects sequence where these natural born vampires, that's the way this world works here, these natural born vampires are being sacrificed to create the blood god La Magra, and it's only through Blade's blood that they can activate this god. And Karen ends up freeing Blade from the torture device, but not before he loses so much blood. And the only way for Blade to come back and save the day is if he drinks some blood. He has no serum, no Whistler to give him serum. All he has is his friend who's willing to sacrifice herself to save him. And she says, just drink my blood. It's the only thing that's going to get us out of this situation, is if you drink my blood. And in essence, she's what she had asked of him in an earlier scene, to accept himself, which he completely rejected with anger. And in the commentary, Wesley Snipes disagreed with the anger. He's like, I don't think I should be angry in this scene, but I think he did. I think he did need to be angry, because he has a personal hatred against this side of himself. If he wasn't angry in that scene, when he's drinking her blood, his resistance to it, which is almost childlike because he's so vulnerable in this scene, he's been drained of all of his own blood. His resistance to it wouldn't have that emotional impact when he finally says, okay, I'll drink your blood because I'm dying. And when he drinks her blood, the sequence is, the music again from Mark Isham is just pounding. It's like the heart pounding of a heartbeat. And it's almost tribal. It's so crazy. It's got so much going on with it. And Mark Isham's music, and if you get that first Blade DVD, you hear one of the calmer tracks, and it's the track that plays when Whistler tells his own story and the story of meeting Blade. Such a beautiful piece of music. But and it's not on the soundtrack, you bastards. Anyway, but if you watch that scene, and when he's drinking Karen's blood, it's you see him first, it's like, it's like I'm drinking water, or it's like I've been drowning and I'm breathing for the first time. And then he doesn't want to stop, and he tells her, and she tells him not to stop, and it's almost sexual. Blade is such a repressed person in this movie. He's so repressed and has so much pain. And by the end of the sequence, when he finally drinks enough blood, he has just this like cathartic and sexual kind of release from it. And he's renewed in a brand new kind of way. He doesn't come out and go, okay, I'll join the blood club. I'm a vampire now. Ooh. He is, one of the reasons he was captured is because he discovered his mother was alive and supporting Deacon Frost. And it's like, you're supporting the guy that killed you, that took you away from me for my entire life. No, I can't support this. And he had to kill her as well. And, Blade, having drunken blood and having gotten over this part of himself, he has a power that he's never had before, drinking actual blood. And when he comes down to take down the bad guys, that's when the techno music comes back in. Because Blade is now fully powered, and he's finally kind of, even though he only just drank blood, but he's done something that he's resisted since he was a child. And he sort of released the evil in a way. This thing that he was so terrified of doing for so long, he finally did. And he did it because he had to do it, and it was because a friend was being kind to him and sacrificing for him. So he kind of has a lot going on within him that's kind of renewed him. And having drank blood, what Joseph Campbell would call, he's now the master of two worlds. The world that he was the master of before, and this thing that he was afraid of for the entire movie, he's now got both going on. And so fully renewed, fully repowered, and fully free to kill vampires as he likes to do. That's when the techno music comes back, and the music tells that part of the story of now Blade's back. Blade's back better than ever. He's going to hit harder than ever. And the filmmaking communicates that when after all the fighting is done and he's gotten to the very last two bad guys, he pulls a sword out of a wall and does this amazing slice, and we get that iconic shot of the camera pushing up to him with the sword, slicing the guys and putting the sword down and looking anime cool. You know what I mean? That iconic shot. But that filmmaking and the music and the performance communicates that Blade has returned. The Blade from the opening sequence of the movie has returned, but better than ever, because he's now renewed and had some resolution to his suffering that he was going throughout the whole movie. And the movie's only telling this part of the story, where he's been suffering for years. He's been suffering since before the movie began, or at least in the period, the movie began with his birth. So in this, at least 20 to 25 years long period, we don't know exactly how old Blade is. Maybe he's in his 30s, I don't know. But for decades long, Blade has been suffering from his birth, the loss of his mother, from Whistler finding him and not being able to drink blood. And who knows, maybe even as a kid, he didn't like that he was drinking people's blood. That much we don't really know. But all of that's going on with this character, and that's what makes Blade a great character, is that he is a man suffering on the inside, and it took the help of a friend and the sacrifice of a friend for him to be comfortable with who he is on the inside. And at the very end of the movie, after defeating Deacon Frost, he had, before the vampires had drained all his blood, he told Karen, maybe I should take your vampire cure and just be fully human. And so, that means he was thinking so much about his humanity throughout the course of this movie and throughout the course of his own life. But after drinking blood and killing all the vampires, his final lines to her are, make me a better serum. I'm not done doing my work, And kind of like Batman, he's recommitted to his work, but now refreshed, now revitalized, and now with a cleaner sense of his purpose. And it's cleaner because he now accepts himself. He's learned the horrible things in life that he needed to learn about growing up, is that sometimes one of your parents is evil, and that ended up being his mom. So sometimes you have a bad parent, because technically this means that your mom abandoned you. She wasn't dead, she actually abandoned you. Or in a way, the human version of his mother, who could have cared for him, died. And so the vampire version abandoned him. And all of that baggage, to learn all these horrible things and to have to deal with that, but also to kind of come to terms with it and realize, okay, but I did have a good dad, and now I have this good friend who can help me. And now I know for sure what it is I want to do in my life, and I'm going to commit to what I've been doing because it's felt right. But now, having quenched that human blood, but only for the right reason, I now know that this is my purpose in life. It's without question, as because Blade has come to this point where he had the golden ticket. You can be a human. You can no longer have to have the thirst again, but at the cost of your powers. And he realized, no, I reject the golden ticket, because I realize I do have a gift, and I do have a purpose, and that's what I need to follow. And the music communicates that journey. And I really wanted to talk about those things, and I know I delved into the story. It didn't seem like I was talking about the music at all times, but every part of telling a story is about telling that one story. It's the story of Blade, a man who was uncomfortable with himself and had to come to terms with the things he didn't like about himself. And once he did that, he could truly be the superior Blade, the best version of himself that he could possibly be. And it took that journey. And I really gotta say hats off to cast and crew for a fantastic Blade. And I love Blade 2 as well. David Goyer, Wesley Snipes, they wanted to make something that was that was what they wanted to see on screen, and they did it. And it took a lot of trials and tribulations. The ending was reworked many, many times to be the ending that we see. But storytelling through music, and what is the story? Because as I keep saying, the idea generates the execution. You don't have a strong idea, the proper execution at the end can never happen. We got to get, we have a lot of sayings that we say now that are out of date and honestly not true. It's not the idea, it's the execution. No, it is the idea. You don't get the execution without the idea. And you got to have the right idea. And it's that knowledge of the if it was the music supervisor who came up with that, whatever it may be. And I certainly know from the commentaries, Wesley Snipes talks about he talks about coming in and talking with the directors about the editing of the action scenes. It's like, you can't just have the editing cut around and try to be stylized. It does have to be about the emotion of the character. And I think stuff like that, I learned so much from these commentaries. That's what makes great filmmaking. That's why Wesley Snipes was at the top. He would have never gotten to the top if he didn't have the right idea. The idea, that little light bulb, that's the exact amount of light you need for the room you're making. You know what I mean? That's what it takes to make the great stuff that we enjoy, is the right idea. Having the right idea, understanding the right philosophy that fits the movie. And like Del Toro making Blade 2, you're not making this movie about yourself. This is a blockbuster movie. This is a Hollywood movie. This is a movie based on a very specific property. You can put yourself into it. When it comes to Blade 2, we got a more vicious monster with strange eccentricities like the tongue that comes out of the mouth. That's from Guillermo del Toro. But he understood, when I'm making Blade 2, I'm making Blade 2. I'm not making Guillermo del Toro's Blade 2. I'm making this character, and it has to be true to that character. You have to tell the story of the character. And if you can't identify with the character, then you're not the right person to do it. Because what makes the big bucks is that core idea. Blade made the big bucks. Blade 2 made the big bucks. Blade 3 made some good money. But, it was because the idea was about the character. David Goyer had a fantastic script that everyone read and was like, we got to make this into a movie. And Wesley Snipes came in, and he was the one that David Goyer saw in his head. That's vision, right? That's the writer's vision. And then Stephen Norrington made it work. And the editors made it work. And the music supervision made it work because they were all thinking the right idea. It takes the right idea. You got to think just like mechanics. They got to use the right wrench. You don't want a monkey wrench when you need a socket wrench, right? You got to have the right idea, and you got to tell a story. And if there's a need, it must be filled. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger's saying right now, be useful. If your only use is your own politics that you learned in college and all that stuff, then I'm sorry, get the hell out of the fucking room. If you're in the business to tell a story, you gotta be true to the art form, and you gotta be true to yourself, but you still gotta be true to the art form and the tasks that which you are being asked to perform. And that's all I got to say. Blade 1 and 2 are some of my favorite movies ever. Some of the first movies I learned from in terms of how filmmaking works. So that's what I got to say. And again, I'm still making stuff. I'm making my little SHL stupid videos, but I'm really proud. I've recently made a little Terminator parody, and that was a combination of me being true to myself, but also trying to honor James Cameron. I just think that's another property I wish people would stop making horrible sequels to. I think Terminator, and it's probably not going to be a popular thing to say, and I should edit this out, but I think Terminator Salvation is as close as it ever got to being faithful to James Cameron's work. And it still needed work, but God, it was, amongst everything else, it was the closest thing to a genuine sequel that I feel we actually got as an audience member, being passionate about those first two Terminator films. And it is the degradation of all these horrible sequels and reboots that's why I'm making this video. If you want to make the great stuff, and if you want to reach audiences and do all that, you gotta do the work. And you also have to have the fundamental understanding that went into making Blade. You know, you have to have that fundamental understanding of what a good story is, why it's a good story, and what went into it. Otherwise, you're just scribbling on the walls. And you know what happens to scribble on the walls? It gets painted over. So that's my thoughts. I really love this movie. Love Blade 1, love Blade 2. If you haven't watched them and this makes you want to watch it, oh, go see it. Screw what I'm saying. Go watch that movie. Really great stuff. But hopefully you'll watch it knowing this stuff and going, oh, that's what makes it great. Because that's what I'm interested in. I'm a filmmaker, been one for over 15 years, and the only thing that interests me is what makes it great. And it's the philosophy, the craftsmanship, and the why. Why are you making it? And like Guillermo del Toro said, it's about the project. The film must come first. You know, even with the casting of Hellboy, it's not because he loves Ron Perlman. He loves Ron Perlman, but it's because Ron Perlman was perfect for that role. And that's what I got to say. If I keep talking, you're going to turn it off anyway. So, peace, aloha, and may the force be with you, unless you're a selfish, pretentious prick. Then turn off the camera because people are tired of listening to you. Ah.